Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be, streaming to you from the East Coast to the left coast and around the world on UCY.tv. This is All Things Apocalyptic with G. Michael Hopf. So, once again, Ebola. It has reached our shores. Now, who did not know that was going to happen? Really. All these politicians telling us that this isn't going to happen. Obama essentially telling us it's unlikely. Our borders wide open. Our airport's not really properly screening passengers. The fact that we even allow people still coming in from that part of the world. So it's here. What happens now? Really, for all those people, when I was talking about this before and other people that I know are talking about it, who's to say it doesn't create a pandemic here? If I were to mention, when I was mentioning that to friends, weeks ago, they're like, "Oh, that's crazy talk. It's never going to happen." But now it's here. But it wasn't that crazy talk that it was going to be here. Well, now it's here. And what happens? How many people did that one gentleman infect? We don't know because it stays dormant for a while. Now they're busy tracking it down. So it comes down to, I was thinking about this, and I always like to look at things kind of in a scientific manner. I used to have in my youth, I used to kind of jump to conclusions on things. And I sometimes found that didn't work out for me. So when something happens, I do try to sit back and objectively look at it. And if you look at this, you either have to figure that, one, the government, the CDC, everyone that's involved in protecting us from these type of infections, pandemics, either are incompetent or deliberately allowing this to occur. I guess there's also probably maybe even an equal chance that it's just happened. It just slipped through without any incompetence at all. But the fact remains that there's probably equal amount of the fact that you can say that they're just as easily to blame for making this deliberate as they are being incompetent. So which is it? I know what I think it is. And tonight we have a great guest that will also probably have a very, very solid opinion on it as well. I'm very, very happy to have author Glenn Tate joining us tonight. So anyone out there who's read the 299 Days series will know exactly who I'm talking about. He's a great guy. And what's great about him is he has a front row seat to the corruption that happens in the halls of government. And I'm sure that's why he'll tell us why he has his firsthand account, or I guess what he's talking about, kind of a firsthand account. He puts it in his book series. He is a resident of the wonderful capital of Washington State, Olympia, which I'm actually familiar with because in my book series, Olympia is the capital of the new republic later down the road. He's a very active prepper. He grew up in remote logging towns of Forks, Washington. By the way, Glenn, quote unquote, keeps his identity a secret, so this isn't his real name, I'm assuming. Because he's fearful of losing his job, and it's also because of the line of work he's in. So I'm really anxious to speak with. Hey, Glenn, are you there?
Yeah, I lost you for just a moment.
Oh,
there
sorry.
we go.
Good. So Ebola. I got to know what your take is on that before you kind of dive into anything else.
Boy, you know what? I'm of two minds on this. I am kind of a political guy, and I am a lawyer, so I often say, well, I can see this either way, but this one I really can. And I've been burned in the past, right, by other things that were supposed to be big pandemics, right, and didn't turn out to be. So that's my hesitancy. You were talking about objectively looking at things, so there's that side of it. But the other part of it is this thing seems different. This particular disease seems different than some of the other ones. The long incubation period, the really high mortality rate, and the fact that it is transmitted, with body fluids and all of that other stuff, and that can be just casual touching of sweat, so it's not like other body fluids. Let me put it that way. But so there's that, and here's the thing: looking at it objectively and scientifically, like you said, Sierra Leone, Liberia, those places have pretty much fallen apart, especially Sierra Leone. I mean, it's destroyed that country, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I mean, there's pretty much no government left and all of that. So I look at what this disease does when it's allowed to run rampant. Obviously, you've got different conditions in a place like Sierra Leone than the United States, but in some ways it's worse here. We're closer together. Probably we don't take things terribly seriously. You know what I mean? People don't care about these things. Most people right now are thinking about, well, let's see, Tom Brady had a bad game last night on Monday Night Football. That is occupying way more energy in this country than Ebola. So it could be big. I've been burned before, but something will be big. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's entirely possible it's Ebola.
Well, what's interesting is it keeps raising its head. I've talked about this, weeks and weeks now. And when it first was kind of happening, I was kind of a little bit more dismissive of it, I'll admit. And just because I was looking at the actual what we should be fearful here in the United States. Like if you go to the hospital, you have a greater chance of getting a staph infection and dying than of getting Ebola. But what's interesting is now that it's here, and it just seems to not like it's because my show's weekly, every single week. There's a new major development. Was it a week ago? Obama is ordering troops. By the way, that would be the last mission I would want to be and actually go to that. I mean, I'd have no problem going and doing other things. I spent 6 years in, but I would just not be like, shit, I have no desire to go there. That would be the last place I'd want to serve. But, things seem to be kind of ramping up for this. And and because of what you do, I just have to ask, the government probably isn't telling us all, correct?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I want to be clear, and it's not that you've exaggerated this by any means, but I observe government and do those things. I don't have, the secret memos or anything. I don't want to overstate my role. I'm an observer of what goes on, and I truly have never been given any, big secret stuff. But you don't need big secret stuff to know all the bad things that are going on. You just need to, read it on the internet, credible sources, and then it helps to have somebody like me say, yeah, that really did happen. I was in that conference room, that kind of thing. So I basically verify what people already know. But the governmental agencies are completely out to lunch. They don't have a clue. They don't know how to do this. They can't actively go and do things. You mentioned something, at screening people flying in from parts of the world. I guess that'd be Central Africa primarily. The political side of me, and I do political stuff and legal stuff. Can you imagine the politics of the President of the United States saying we don't want anyone coming on a plane from Africa? Are you kidding me? I mean, think of the politics of that. And so that's an example of why these agencies can't do anything, because they can't do what needs to be done. And there's a perfect example of it. So, they can't do that. And also, the CDC, I don't know much about the CDC, but I'm talking about the state level version, State Department of Health, where I am. One of the last places to ever get any funding, and believe me, I'm not a big proponent of government funding. I'm not crying about this and saying we need to raise taxes to do more government stuff, but it's one of those departments that never, seems to get what it needs. I mean, there are always other higher priorities like, welfare and transfer payments and all that sort of thing. And so much like when there's a big flood or earthquake or something, people say, well, I thought FEMA had all this money. Why didn't they do anything right? Well, it's just kind of the agency that, some of the worst employees go to and that sort of thing. So, yeah, they'll be completely caught off guard. One of the things that's different, and I think perhaps worse for the United States with something like Ebola, is in Sierra Leone, they don't have just-in-time inventory that they rely on for everything. There was some flooding, as you probably know, down in Las Vegas that washed out the main highway, and I'm told that there were shortages of, not huge life or death shortages, but in a day or two there were shortages of gasoline and linens and some pharmacies and stuff like that. It ended up being okay. But when you have a flood that washes out a couple miles of highway and you can start to see signs of supplies being a problem, that's a big deal. 5-10% of truckers get sick, can't drive, they don't want to drive, they refuse to drive to certain places. You have disruptions of diesel fuel. I mean, we are so dependent on, I'm from where you live. You probably grow tomatoes and stuff that I eat, and they come up on a up to I-5 on a semi truck. I mean, how is that even manageable? So you're going to have huge I think, almost self-inflicted problems from just-in-time inventory from something like Ebola or a variety of other things. So that's what I think is the big danger, and we can't handle it in this country. Most people in this country, if they don't have their Doritos, that they're getting on their ABT cards or something, they flip out. They go actually insane and start breaking things, and that, it's the social and political ripple effects of something like a pandemic or an earthquake or whatever else it might be that I really worry about. It's the people that are dangerous, not usually the actual threat that starts the people down the bad road.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that last part of your comment. I often believe that it's never the event itself that causes the apocalypse or an apocalyptic type event. The event occurs, and it's people's reaction to that causes the downfall of something. It's their panic, and that's usually what it is. The panic turns to violence, and then I've known a lot of people in law enforcement. I spent time in the military for a while, myself working for the government for a period of time, and they can't and they fully are aware, and you're probably aware of this too. They can't. I mean, if a certain percentage of the population decides to go crazy, there's nothing they can do.
Oh, absolutely, and they know this, and
Yeah.
they when they do their projections and they do their planning, wargaming, whatever you want to call it, they know this. They absolutely do, and that's not from firsthand knowledge. I want to be very frank. This is from friends of mine that are involved in this, and they say, oh yeah, when the map starts turning colors, it gets red pretty quickly all over the country.
So Glenn, why don't you? Because I just kind of jumped into this.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a step back? Why don't you, for those listeners that are out there, why don't you introduce yourself to them?
You bet. My fake name is Glenn Tate, and I'm in Olympia, Washington. I'm a regular guy. Suburban guy, live in the suburbs. I'm not, a former SEAL or something like that. I'm just, one of the things we talk about in the book is untrained civilian goofball. That's my designation, UCG, untrained civilian goofball. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. And I work in the legal and sort of political realm and get to see a lot of things. I've been in state government for a while, and I'm going to keep things super vague because I need to. And Olympia, Washington is one of the most left-leaning places in the United States of America, and so I'm sort of trapped here, and I look around and I see things and can describe things in the book that people will then write into me and say, oh my goodness, I thought you were exaggerating, and then there's a news story or something, and they say, oh my goodness, you weren't kidding, it's true. So, and I was a country boy, grew up that way, redneck skills, knew how to do stuff, and lost it all because I decided I wanted to be a lawyer and live in the suburbs and have a comfortable life. And then I realized how fragile things are. I was talking about just-in-time inventory a moment ago. That's a great example of what I'm talking about fragile. And then I started seeing things, budget and policy things in the state of Washington, realizing how completely unsustainable this is. Of course, it's far worse at the federal level than even at the state level. And one of the things that really sealed it for me was a rather high-ranking state official confided in me that he was getting ready for when all this broke down, and he showed me some stuff that he had, and it made my head spin how prepared the guy was. And I thought, this guy gets not top secret briefings, none of this is classified, but he gets, political and economic news that a lot of us don't get and maybe wouldn't even understand. And it's caused him to react this way. And by the way, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm concerned about things. It's another thing to fill up your basement with thousands of dollars of stuff. That's when you're serious about it. And so that got me thinking, got me involved in this. And the book came about, the books, there are 10 of them. Now there's audiobooks. On October 26th they come out, all 10 of them. It started with the Easter Bunny. People say, what? Is this guy delusional? No, it started with the Easter Bunny. My wife was very opposed to all of this, very reluctant, which is a theme, especially in book one, about this. And this, by the way, is a thing that's touched a lot of, it's usually guys it touches. There's some women out there that have reluctant husbands or boyfriends. But it's really touched the struggles that you have to go through when you're doing this all on your own with resistance, because they think, oh, you're crazy, none of this bad stuff's going to happen. So had to deal with that, and I needed to explain to her why, if there was an event, all of a sudden there'd be a bunch of food and ammunition and water and other things that showed up in the garage. She didn't know where it came from. It came from a storage locker that I had to rent secretly, which is pathetic, by the way. Here's something about the book series. I do not come out of this book series looking like a particularly studly guy. I'm okay with that. Right? I mean, there's some nonfiction in this fiction, but it's extremely real. I never thought, and you're going to laugh at this because you're an author and you have a very successful series, I never thought anyone would read this. I never thought anyone would read this, and I just started writing it down. But it started with the Easter Bunny story, and I needed an explanation to her when all this stuff showed up. And I thought, well, there's two ways I can go about this. I can say, I told you so, and you've been wrong, and that doesn't work super well with her. She's a doctor in real life, and doctors, if you've ever run into that personality type, you know that they're always right? Especially ER doctors, right? So I knew that telling her she was wrong would be a really bad thing to say at probably the fork in the road in the entire relationship, right? There's been a big crisis, and she can either follow me or reject me. So this is a pretty big thing. Or another approach would be a face-saving approach where I say, the Easter Bunny dropped this stuff off. So let's don't worry about how and why and the blame game. Let's just go and, do what we need to do. So I elected the Easter Bunny approach. And then I thought, well, I need to come up with a speech, right? I mean, I better get this right. And so I started writing bullet points, and I called it the Easter Bunny speech on a Post-it note. And I made little points about why I did this and what we're going to do and how we're going to take care of things. And because I'm a lawyer and I present information for a living, I thought, well, the bullet points, I'm going to expand on this. So it became a page, then became a couple pages, and it became, in my mind, the Easter Bunny speech. And I thought, well, wouldn't this be a nice little chapter? I mean, I don't write fiction. I mean, I write legal briefs and political things, but, I'll just write it down like I was talking to my wife, and so it'll be the Easter Bunny speech. Well, then I realized I needed a chapter to describe where I'm coming from and why I'm doing this, and a chapter about why she's, got normalcy bias and can't comprehend anything I'm saying and is so scared and reluctant and rejecting all of this. And so then I had to keep expanding that. So it became a book, and then I just kept going and going and going. I've met all these amazing people in my life that are really interesting, and I just started throwing them into this story, and I just created this storyline. It took me 2.5 years. Here's the thing. You're going to love this. I wrote this in secret. My wife had absolutely no idea. I wrote 3,800 pages that turned out to be 10 books. No idea whatsoever. She wasn't real happy when she found out, by the way. So put it all together, and I thought, oh, no one's going to read this because, I'm just writing down stuff, a lot of which is real. I project out into the future. I believe a partial collapse is coming, economically based. Utilities stay on. Parts of the United States sort of function. Other parts are pretty poorly off. But it's an alternative to a lot of book series out there that I love, by the way. I mean, EMP series and everything. People need to think about that. They need to understand a total collapse and what that means, and they need to comprehend to the extent they can what that is. But 299 Days is really different. It's the only series I know of where it's partial. There's a little bit of government. There's a little bit of food supply. There's a little bit of gasoline. There's kind of an oppressive government some places, but it's less oppressive down the road, but it's really bad in the next city over, and that sort of variation. So I wrote it, and I thought I'll self-publish it. I wanted a $1,500 used pickup. That was my goal. And so I thought I'll self-publish it and sell a couple of these and maybe, get a pickup or whatever. It'll be great. I'll get the message out. And I don't know. I sat down. I spent 2.5 years. I might as well finish it, right? So but I thought, I'm going to get a hold of one publisher before I go and self-publish it, just to satisfy myself, and say I did. So I got a hold of Prepper Press, right? I mean, the name says it all, right? They'll probably be at least receptive to this. And they ended up wanting to do the entire 10-book series, much to my great and pleasant surprise. And the thing has absolutely taken off. I mean, it's beyond my wildest dreams. And then the audiobooks come out October 26th, all 10 at the same time, have an absolutely fantastic narrator who's who's New York Times bestseller. Kevin Pierce is his name. So anyway, that's been a bit long-winded. I appreciate your patience, but that in a nutshell is me, why I did it, and what I did.
No, it's all actually really good, and now I've got a few questions that come from that. Because one thing, as far as about convincing your wife, and I think everyone that preps, everyone that prepares, those of us that know something is coming our way, and we're being proactive, can be a problem in families. Unfortunately, it's not in my family. But I know there are many people listening out there that it's been a problem. Where's your wife today as far as it relates to the preparedness aspect of things?
Tolerant, I think, would be the best word. Still thinks it's a little bit crazy. Rolls her eyes a little bit. Polite and cordial. I need to, I'm not trying to portray her as some mean person or something. Not fully buying into it. Quite honestly, the success of the book has allowed me to do a lot of that stuff, and it hasn't impacted the family budget, so I guess she doesn't care. I say cordial. The bad side of it is she refers to this as a hobby, which annoys the crap out of me because it is condescending and it is erroneous. And believe me, it's going to be hard in the not too distant future when all these things I'm doing are going to be saving her life and other people's lives, our family and others. To not say, this little hobby, enjoy this delicious meal, enjoy the security, enjoy the medical supplies, enjoy all this, enjoy the communications, enjoy the fresh water, enjoy the shelter, because it was a quote hobby. I'm not going to do that, because if I approach this whole thing with the Easter Bunny approach, I need to maintain that. I need to be above this, to be honest. But I'll tell you, I am airing all kinds of annoyances with my wife, right? But that word hobby is, few things get me really pissed off, and that word does it.
Well, one thing I haven't gotten it, but I've often thought it'd be a fun thing to sell to sell to preppers and things like that, is like a MRE that says crow. And that's what you give those people, those family members. That's their first meal when the shit hits the fan. Is the crow.
I'm going to totally steal that idea. Thank you very much.
Please do. But it's a very, very tough thing. I wrote a blog piece a while ago about it, and because there's a lot of people that deal with that. And I've got a really good friend now that he was not into prepping. Didn't own anything, didn't even own a firearm. And now he's like fully on board. And he and I train once a week. And the interesting thing now, but his wife is completely not on board, and kind of this rolling the eyes, thinking we're crazy, that nothing will ever happen in our lifetime. And I'm like, well, to say something would never happen is it's like saying you're never going to ever be in a car accident. You're never ever going to ever have to go to the hospital. Of course, something will happen. Does it have to be a worldwide pandemic that kills 98% of the population? Will it be an EMP? There's a probability that those things probably won't happen. The probability actually that something like what you portray is actually looks pretty close out there on the horizon right now.
Yeah, that's when. Yeah. Oh, pardon me.
No, go ahead. And so, and I've said before on my show, like, what is an apocalyptic event? And really, the apocalypse is when your way of life changes dramatically. It's like the way you're living your life today is not the same tomorrow. Everything ends. Things change. Governments collapse. It doesn't have to turn into an asteroid strike and everyone's living in a cave somewhere. But everything is so altered that your life is never the same, and it never goes back to what it was before. So.
Exactly right, and that's depicted a lot in the books. I constantly refer to, there'll be a topic. A topic was marriage and the age at which a lot of people currently get married. Maybe late 20s, maybe early 30s, and I'm speaking now of more white collar folks. But I mean, they often sort of complete their education and their first couple jobs, and then have kids. All that, and then of course that doesn't happen anymore. And one of the characters in the book is my then 16-year-old daughter, who is at age 16, looking like she's going to get married, and it seems perfectly normal. But then, we look back at the way things were and how we all had visions. My wife and I had visions of this is when our daughter gets married and she has this kind of life and goes to this kind of college and does that kind of thing. They're all shattered, and then there's a new norm that takes over. And by the way, the new norm of getting married younger is the way most of the people in the world live, and they have lived for most of time. So it's sort of like the United States is getting out of this bubble that it's in and getting back to, the way the rest of the world is. By the way, there's tons of bad things about the way the rest of the world is, like lawlessness and all that other stuff. I'm not I'm not knocking America. I'm just saying some parts of it will change, and that's what this is all about. The series is about 85% about people and how they react to new situations, how some of them might start off a particular way with normal bias and get over it, or maybe some people are okay initially, and then they want the world to be the way it was, and they kind of freak out a little bit. It's probably 10%, firefights and cool stuff like that, which I love, and then maybe 5%, gear and like here's how to treat water and all that other stuff. But it's really about people, because I can relate things. I can learn things by learning about people and what motivates them. I'm not the kind of guy who reads manuals and figures out, how to treat water. But if I hear about a person who's treating water, and then you mentioned some of the measurements and things like that in it, then I go, oh, okay, and I can relate to it. So it's one of these things where, and this is actually one of the really, really good things about our genre. We are able to get a lot of information out hidden as a cool, interesting story. How many people have said to you after they read your books, I didn't even realize I was learning all this stuff, and then I just learned all this stuff, right? That happens. And so that's another neat thing about this.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. There's other people's books that are very, very incredibly informative, almost like a technical manual, and then some people's are just where the narrative kind of shocks people's systems and gets them to react, which is good, because I know you've received, and I've talked to so many of other wonderful authors out there, and they all will say one thing that they get, and it's pretty universal, is that they hear from people like you practically you changed my life. I read your book and it scared the shit out of me, to the point that I'm acting. I'm doing something now because I can now see this happening, because the way you describe it, because books, like movies, in some way you get emotionally wrapped up into them, and then you kind of put yourself into the character's shoes. You're kind of, especially if you can mirror them, and then they imagine, oh, that's my child going through this. That's my wife having to experience this horrific thing. I don't want that to occur. What do I need to do? And it's without a doubt, my books, and I'm sure your books, we get caught up into this thing where, are they horror, or are they dystopian, or are they post-apocalyptic, or are they prepper fiction? There's all these kind of ways of trying to describe our books. And so many people, whether it's hardcore preppers reading them that can get something out of them, or just even entertainment, or just somebody who doesn't have any basis in preparation. And in some regards, I love it when the person who's never, ever stockpiled anything, taken any classes, gotten any training, picks it up, and then decides they're going to do something. Because that's one less person that you and I are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe once a day I get an email or a Facebook message from somebody that says exactly what you said, and it is gratifying. And I'll tell you, it never gets old. I mean, it is such an enormous honor. And I'm getting goosebumps talking to you now about this, but I'm serious. It's an enormous honor, because we know that there are dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know the number, of people out there that are going to make it through this because of what they read and how they were affected by these stories and what they got out of it. An example of this, and it's somewhat comical, is there's a character in the book who's real. Almost everybody in book one is real, by the way. Mark Colson, he's my neighbor out where my cabin is, and he calls me Glenn Tate, which is funny. And so I drive up, he's up on his balcony, and he always yells out, "Glenn Tate!" And he's a big Marine, right? You like it. And he says, hey, I'm mad at you, you asshole. And a big smile on his face. I said, why are you mad? And he said, my wife read your books, and now she went and spent $500 on guns and ammunition she's never wanted to shoot before, and now that's all she wants to do. And he's smiling, right? So there's an effect, right, from a friend of mine. And it's that kind of stuff that it motivates people, because $500 is real money. And so that's not just talk, that's action right there.
And I look at it as like it's like having insurance, and
Yeah.
that do we all have car insurance, health insurance, and whatnot. Having those things is an insurance policy, the wife of my friend, because she was kind of arguing with me and my friend, was it a couple weeks ago? We're all at the dinner and saying like, this is never going to happen, and this is all, you guys are crazy, just wasting money. And I was like, well, what if it's not changing your life? Your life is going to stay the same, but allow him to go do what he's going to do, but your life still stays the same. What's the problem? So if something does happen, you can look at him and go, thank you. Otherwise,
Exactly.
you're going to look at him and go, I already know the conversation. Like, why didn't you do something about this? And it's such a bane for some people out there to have that. Do you have any recommendations for people that are struggling with trying to convince a spouse or a loved one or a family member to come on board?
Yeah, and I can base it on how this went for me. Of course, I have a little bit different ending to this story, which was one day I told my wife, I wrote 10 books and they got published, and I thought you should know about it. So that's a little different. That most people aren't going to have that experience. But the first thing I always say is just do it. It's great to get their approval and to get their buy-in. And I'm going to speak as a guy and a reluctant wife because that's more common. So it's great to have that acceptance into the validation, all of that stuff. But guess what? That's a luxury. And, if this were, you have a hobby train set or whatever, or you're a bird watcher or whatever it is, then, maybe your wife's approval is great or whatever, but we don't have that luxury here. This is literally a matter of life and death, which is what makes us entirely different than any other topic out there. So just do it. If you get caught, I talk about this in the book, like getting caught, going to the gun store and stuff like that, getting caught with some food and all of this other stuff. Deal with it. Odds are that, she's not going to take off on you over this stuff. I know, I know that sounds bad. You have to do it. The convincing, I think, you have to have credibility, which is a big, big topic. It's addressed in the book, and I talk about it because I had to do this too. I can't just say every single time something concerns me, oh, that we're all going to die of Ebola in 2 weeks. If you start doing that kind of stuff, and by the way, you could think it, and there's a lot of threats out there that I think are going to happen that I never ever mention to her, just because I don't want to fritter away credibility, because it all comes down to that moment. You remember I was talking about in the garage and the Easter Bunny thing. When you're at that fork in the road and she's either going to follow you or reject you and stay in town and be killed in about 2 weeks, or go with you and bug out to a safe place. When you're talking those kind of stakes, you've got to have that trust that she has in you, and you've got to build it up slowly. And you can't let the prepping take all your time or your money. This can't be like, that you're not seeing another woman, but it's like all your time and energy and money are being focused on, showered on something other than her. Can't do that. Yeah, for the price of going out to one dinner, you could buy a couple 100 pounds of rice and beans. I get that, but switch it off, and every other weekend go out to dinner with her and thoroughly enjoy yourself, because see, that's relationship prepping. And I'm not Dr. Phil. I hope I don't sound like Dr. Phil, but I'm telling you it's important, because this relationship is really, really important. What good is all of this? There's a big collapse and you bug out and you got all this stuff and you got a team and you're squared away. You're the king of your local area because you were completely prepping the whole time. What good is it if the love of your life is back in town getting raped? I hate to be so graphic, but I'm serious. What good is it? So you have to understand that the relationship is part of this whole prepping package. And in my case, there's a practical side to it. She's a doctor. It's a pretty good team member to have. So, there's that part of it too, but that's a smaller part of it. So credibility and just do it. I know that could sound a little contradictory. I think there's a little bit of, at least with my wife, I think it's pronounced hoplophobia. It's a mental condition where people are afraid of guns. I think that's rather prevalent among females. Sorry to stereotype, but that's been my experience. And I don't know where they get this stuff from, but they think these metal objects just like explode and all of that, and they're always dangerous. And if you have one in the house, kids die. I don't know how you deal with that. Try taking them shooting. One thing I did was Father's Day. I get anything I want, right? It's Father's Day. I said, let's go out shooting. We shot 22s, shot an AR in 22 and a nice smooth revolver in 22. No tactical stuff, wearing jeans and a jacket. Of course, in June in Washington State, you still need a jacket, right? Sadly. But so that kind of stuff, and just kind of break the ice. It's Father's Day. What's she going to do? Say no? And it wasn't like, hey, here's a 308 battle rifle. Let's see if a 105-pound woman, is going to get knocked over by the recoil. So you got to really think this thing through, because it's that relationship is a key prep. I hope that's really all I can come up with. That's been my experience.
No, that's good, and I hope that some listeners that have some of those spouses that don't want to prepare, and hopefully that might help them. Let's kind of dive into your books, and the event that occurs. I can see being one that's happening now, actually. I know because you write in your books, but books are at the same time fiction.
Yeah.
Where is Glenn Tate as far as thinking, or is there a timeline for this type of event to occur?
You know what? That's the one thing I've consistently got wrong. Nobody ever says that, by the way, right? But no, it's the one part I think this should have happened a while ago. Now, the timing is off, but the content is spot on. And this was spooky a couple months ago when the illegal immigration wave was at the height. I write about that in the book, being a problem and not triggering everything, but being an exasperator of the problem. And I said the Texas governor said, if the federal government doesn't protect our southern border, Texans will. That's virtually verbatim what Rick Perry said in June, and that was pretty spooky. All kinds of other little things, and see, they're not hard to predict. I am not a mystic, a psychic. I'm not Nostradamus. I mean, for example, Detroit falling apart. I mean, you don't have to be psychic to see that one coming. You just have to accept that America is not always going to be prosperous and happy and free. And once you get past that, mistaken identity or mistaken idea, all the other stuff makes sense. So, it's right on schedule. I don't know what the schedule is. I know that sounds a little elusive, but it's the best I can do. It's right on schedule. All the building blocks leading up to where I think this is going are in place. I look at international things. Yesterday, by the way, Bank of China announced that they would be trading between euros and renminbi straight across without going through dollars, without using dollars as trade. So that means euros, British pound, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, of course Russia, but that's not a surprise. I'm probably missing a few and leaving them out, but a good chunk. The euro, how much trade in the world goes on among Euro countries? If they can now settle these things in renminbi, they don't need dollars. When demand for dollars goes down, the value of dollars goes down. When the value of dollars goes down, the prices in dollars go up. I mean, this is not hard to predict. So all those sorts of things are happening. People are getting more and more frustrated with the government. We now see the poll that says a quarter of the people in the country are open to the idea of secession. I mean, wow. All the building blocks are there. Timeline, I've quit predicting. Soon, here's a weird thought, and tell me if you've ever had this thought. I'm sorry to interview you, right? But tell me if you've ever had this thought. You sit there and you think, when all this falls apart, is it going to be a bit of a letdown? Is it going to be like you're going to shrug and go, well, that took a long time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking, and I've thought about this too. Sometimes I think we're always waiting for an event, something just huge to occur. Mm-hmm. But I have thought sometimes we're actually in the middle of it. And when you're actually experiencing it, and it's kind of like a slow motion thing, that you actually don't know you're experiencing it. That we're actually in the crash right now.
Oh, yeah.
We're actually living it, and it's just happening so slow in little increments. Things are here and here and here that we don't really witness it. I mean, if you go back 2 years and see what a gallon of milk is, if you go back and see how it's only when you put them up. And what if you were to cut out all the little headlines and put all the news and put it on a wall and then start to create a timeline that it all of a sudden comes into focus and you go, oh, there it is. I've been living it the entire time. And sometimes I think we're waiting for that kind of that crash of 2008, but something on steroids or something else, or a big, huge kind of an event that's an attack or something dramatic that makes for great TV. But what if it's not great TV? What if it's this slow where we turn into Detroit?
Yes,
across the country.
I talk about the Detroitification of America. And look at Detroit, classic example. They are now obviously officially bankrupt. A bankruptcy judge ruled that they can indeed turn off the water to people who haven't paid them in years. Oh, that's a shocking legal principle. I mean, people don't pay for years, and you can turn off the services. So that didn't happen overnight. I mean, Detroit started falling apart a long time ago and got really bad, I'm going to say like within the last 10 years. But now the pace increases. So I'm not saying that things will take decades and all of that, because the pace does quicken. And once you take Detroit, for example, you have now water shutoffs and big chunks of the city, without water service. People are going to leave, people are going to flee. There's going to be sort of like soft refugee problem. You're going to have crime like even higher than it is. And you're going to have all these spillover effects that then create more and more effects that create more and more effects. So there is a quickening. And I think when you look at the headlines, the chronology of all these headlines, the amount of time in between these big events that used to be pretty amazing things is getting more and more compressed. So there'll be more and more of them. And in my books, May Day is a big event financially, but it's not like everything falls apart. It takes a week for most people to even start to realize that there's a problem, and then it takes another few weeks for things to really break down, and then it takes months for things to get where they are. And I think I think there will be a big event or some big events that will make it even more clear that a collapse has been occurring and is occurring, and then all those spillover things, the Walmart's getting torn apart by people who want Doritos, that sort of thing, then it'll be obvious. As I'm fond of saying, it's not like people will turn on CNN and there's a slow crawl, scrolling thing going across the bottom that says, this just in, the United States of America has collapsed. That's not going to happen.
Well, where do you think government's going to be in all this? And do you think that we're talking about the United States government. Where do you think that are they playing a role in this, or are they just completely, absolutely incompetent? What do you think?
Let's see. I don't truly know. I mean, at the very highest levels, and I don't mean like necessarily like on an org chart. I don't mean the President of the United States necessarily, but I mean like the people who run things. I think they have to know of currency. The United States dollar has got to crash. I don't know if it's slow, medium, or instantaneous crash. They've got to know that. They've got to know that churning $8 trillion a year in short-term treasury bonds, that is to say we need to borrow $8 trillion, a 6-week note or a 6-month note, and we pay it off and borrow more. That's what that churning means. That if just a fraction of people who are buying U.S. bonds every 6 weeks or 6 months just kind of stop, then we don't have anywhere else to borrow that money from. So the interest rates need to go way up, which means we have to pay a ton more interest, and we don't have any money for national parks and all that other stuff. I mean, they all know this. So they have to know that this is a problem. They do know. I know that they know what the ramifications are and how quickly, about 72 hours, I think, everything completely falls apart. So they know all that. Are they doing it on purpose? That part I don't know. It would not surprise me because people in power, evil people in power, do stuff like this all the time, and it's the way the world works, unfortunately, and the United States has had a pass for a couple hundred years, and I think that's over. So, yeah, they could be. I have no proof of it. I'm sorry I'm being such a lawyer about this. I'm always thinking of evidence and all that other stuff, but I'm really careful not to, jump to conclusions. So, bottom line, wouldn't surprise me. But they know that they're offering solutions to all of this, that if we just give them more tax money and more powers and more NDAA and all that other stuff, they can protect us. They all know that that's just a load of crap. So that part I can attest to.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that. The largest prepper in the world right now is the United States government. They're stockpiling and caching things everywhere. And I always find it humorous when they hear the arguments about gun control but they're the biggest purchasers of ammunition, of arms. They're the biggest, and they want to go after gun dealers, and they're the biggest gun dealers in the world. It's comical, but it's typical. It's whenever you're doing something, it's better to distract and point your finger at somebody else. But the whole saying, when you're pointing, three fingers are pointing back at you. So, there's no doubt. I've talked to people, and it's all the same story. They know it's not sustainable what's happening. They don't know what else to do. If they were to tell everybody, then everything would collapse then. So they kind of have to, when you have a fiat type currency, it's built upon faith that it's valuable. And when you tell people it's not, well, then guess what? Everything collapses then. So, so they have to it's like this, they're playing this thing, but you're right. You see these events compressing and getting closer and closer and closer. And I think that's where there's an anxiety that's out there. It's everywhere. And it's even coming up in kind of some mainstream people. They're becoming a little bit more aware of what's happening, and that's why I think you see a rise in not just say our genre specifically, but you see it in even some of the movies that are being made to some regard. But you also really see it, I think, in the alternative media that's really sprouted up, where there's more sources for alternative news because there's a hunger for it. There's a hunger to hear the alternative than what the mainstream or what the power brokers and in the halls of government are wanting to push.
Oh, and I know from personal experience that mainstream media folks who I interact with, they know that their listenership, their viewership, readership, all of that is just going down, down, and down. And at first they wondered why, and if I knew him well, especially, if I had a couple beers or something, I'd list off the example of the week, maybe it was Jason Blair or whatever, just making up stories and being nominated, I think, for a Pulitzer or something like that, and it was all fake. And I say, nobody believes you guys anymore. And there's real stuff going on out there that people really care about that you guys don't cover because you don't want to offend people and you don't want to be controversial and you don't want to alienate advertisers and all of that. So, yeah, they're not being listened to and they know it. And the alternative media, that's one of the cool things about all of this. We have quite a few powerful forces arrayed against us, but one of the cool things is the internet. We're using it right now to talk. We're reaching a lot of people who can hear this and hopefully act on it, get prepared and do all those other things. And so thank goodness for the internet. It has been outstanding, which is one of the reasons I think that when stuff falls apart, it'll be one of the first things to go. And I write about that too.
It'll be the internet will be one of the first things that goes away.
I don't know if it goes away. It'll just be so controlled. It'll be like China, where you can get on the internet and get a weather report and get a report about how awesome your government is. But people quit reading that too.
They'll clamp down on it.
Yeah, and they have some means to do it, but they're always going to be sneaky guys and gals who are way ahead of them on this, and there'll be a hunger for it. I'm seeing it the mainstream world. I mean, normal people. Sometimes they'll use a key phrase that alerts me that maybe they're on board with this. Little things, maybe it's a paracord bracelet people wear on the weekend. Little things I look for, and look at gun sales. That is, again, back to this whole thing about people putting their money where their mouth is. Gun sales and ammunition sales. That is the best, in my mind, scientific indicator of where people are at. And it's not the guy who has 10 AR-15s who's buying another 20. That's not where this is. I have so many people, they know I shoot and they know I teach classes. And they, all the time, hey, this weekend, I'm thinking about buying an AR-15. What should I get? And can we go out shooting? And I take a lot of people out shooting for the first time, which I love doing. And so that is, they're taking their money, they're taking their time, and in some cases they are, I don't know, experiencing the ire of their wife for taking their money and their time and going out and doing this. And so that's when it's real. And I don't think, like all across America, a lot of people have decided to become plinkers. This isn't like, golf is a big rage or something like that. This is, people are doing this for a reason. And look at the guns they're getting. They're not getting little plinker toy guns, which I like, by the way, like a Ruger 1022. Fine firearm, love it. It's a lot of fun. Everyone should own one. No, they're getting AR-15s with, aim point, red dots and stuff like that. They're getting ready for what they know is coming. And thank goodness. Do you know, we don't have an exact number, how many millions of AR-15s have been sold in the past 5 years? It's mind-blowing, and there's a reason for it. I have friends in the arms industry, and you know this, they can't produce them fast enough. There's a little bit of a glut right now, by the way. It's a good time to get an AR-15, everybody. Now, get yourself an AR-15 if you don't already have one, because prices will be going back up after the next Sandy Hook. So anyway, people are, they're getting it. Thank goodness, a small portion of people are getting it. The people who don't get it are getting even more and more ignorant and isolated and ridiculous. And it's going to be really rough on them. And too bad. I'm sorry. I got over that a while ago. I used to, want to try to save everybody. Not anymore. I'm sorry. I've become jaded, and I can't save everybody. And they just need to get out of my way. I'm not going to hurt them, but stay the hell back.
Yeah, it's not your responsibility to, and I think that those are the type of people that will sit and look toward, and this is where we kind of have to be fearful. Maybe that's not the right word, or suspect of. Maybe that's a better word. Suspect of those people that don't want to prepare and look toward the government for their needs. Those will be the ones that could be deployed against us.
Yes.
You can kind of see in some of the training that happens within some of the law enforcement agencies out there where people, or even some of the topics that you and I are talking about right now, are considered bad, and we're now being associated with kind of terrorism, domestic kind of, domestic terrorists would talk about states' rights. Domestic terrorists talk about, they use keywords like liberty and patriot. And you hear that kind of stuff, it's like, really? That's just me using the word liberty and patriot now puts me over here in this camp that I'm the enemy of the people all of a sudden. It says a lot.
Yeah, and the unprepared people, and talk about this in the book, are going to become, the army, not a very well-equipped, well-trained, or well-disciplined army. They're just going to be, lightly armed foot soldiers to go out and do governmental stuff. Classic example of that, government will say, hey, those preppers, crazy preppers, they're hoarding food. You know what? They've got food and you don't. You need to go get that food from them. And that's how the government simultaneously does two things. One, they solve the problem of hungry people because they're having hungry people go steal it from a private party. And number two, those evil liberty people who are actually prepared, get filleted by a group of looters. So as the government, you're killing two birds with one stone, and expect that. And even if the government isn't out orchestrating that, they don't need to. People go bananas, and when they think people have food. In the book, the best illustration of this is there's a Mormon family. I'm not LDS or anything. Have friends that are, and so I was writing about a friend of mine, and I talk about how the neighborhood weenies, as I call them, all the state workers, just get it in their minds that the Mormons have all this food. Let's go get it from the Mormons. And it's, it's religious bigotry, and it's thuggish, and it's horrible. And they go and they try that. It doesn't work out so well for them. But we're going to see tons and tons of that, which is why I think, to the extent humanly possible, and this doesn't work for everybody, you need to physically be away from large groups of people, not in the boonies, because I'm telling you what, if I just walk out in the woods, I'm not a wilderness survival guy. I'm going to have mosquito bites. I got hay fever. I'm going to die out in the woods in a couple of days. I'm no tough guy. but so you need some, amenities, and you need people around who are doctors and who know how to treat water, and security. You're going to need that, so you need people, but try to find that happy medium away from large cities, because they're going to be super nasty places to be.
Hey, Glenn, I have really enjoyed our time together, but we are coming up to the top of the hour.
Sure.
And we've got a couple minutes, so why don't you tell people where they can find your books, where they can email you, contact you, website information? Go.
Yeah, you bet. 299 days, 299 days, like one less than 300. Just Google it. It'll come up. The website is 299days.com. Amazon soon. Audible will be launching the audiobooks. Extremely excited about that. Facebook, 299 days, parentheses, the book. I interact a lot on Facebook, put up cool pictures almost every day of people with gear from the book and holding up their books. And I got a picture of the book at the North Pole from a Coast Guard guy. I mean, all kinds of cool stuff. And email, glenntate123@gmail.com, and Glenn has one N. So that's a cool thing. When you make up a name, you can spell it any way you want, right? So Glenn Tate, 123@gmail.com, and get a hold of me. I love talking to people. I'm supposed to be getting this message out. I'm not going to get heavy on anybody, but I'm just going to say this sort of somewhat vaguely. I'm supposed to be getting this message out. I love getting this message out. I love, being on your show and talking and getting people engaged in this. So get a hold of me. I spend a lot of time emailing people back, and I absolutely love it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I wish I had more time. We could sit and talk more. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I'm glad to know that there's other people out there that are just like me. But I know everyone's listening is like us. They think like us, and they're ready for the kind of that tsunami that's coming our way. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's coming without a doubt. So, Glenn, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, everybody, that's our show tonight. Everyone, please check out Glenn's books. Go to his website. Email him, glenntate123@gmail.com. I put up a link on the chat room where you can pick up his book series, 299 Days. Like before, stay frosty, everybody.